So again, this morning you got this. It's called In Class 15, 11/15/2017, which is today's date, unless I screwed up, but that's what it says on the bottom there. So you all got that, and if you take that, especially if you've already got Chapter 3 done and Chapter 4 done, and you want to zone me out for a while, that's your call. All right. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring those up as soon as I can find them. Right there. So this is the same thing that I gave you. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over problem 3.3. So if you want to fill the stuff in as I type it in, fine. If you don't, or you'd rather just listen, that's fine too. Now, good, bad, or indifferent, I went through, and as you can see, I put a boatload of comments in here. I basically replicated everything that was in the book. All right? Now, I wouldn't expect you to do that. Right now, if I run this program as it is, not too much happens. All right, but the idea is what we want to have happen is we've got 5 bulleted items there, and we want the first bullet to say Wentzville, the second one to say St. Louis, the third to say O'Fallon, the fourth to say St. Peter's, and the fifth to say St. Charles. Does that make sense? So that's what we're desiring to do in here. All right. So, most of the time they gave you all or at least part of the code that you were supposed to use to do this. Did they always do that? No, but like I said, most of the time they did. So right now, as I mentioned, it is set up. Everything that's in here is set up so that it gives you the unordered list. That said, there is no JavaScript in here. So right now, those 5 values here do not even appear. All right. So I left those values in there just so you could see what was there. The other thing too, you may or may not care about this, and I think I mentioned it before, but in case I didn't, sometimes people look at this file and they get confused. This file, this modernizer, is used for older browsers. In other words, older browsers that might have a hard time understanding HTML5 tags and the like. Basically, it says if you don't understand what it is, treat it like it's just a regular text box. All right, if you don't know what it is. Because if you're using, and there are still people out there using it, you can go out online and you can see different, not polls, but different ratings of who's using what browser. I'll always remember this. This was years ago, all right, many years ago. I went, my brother moved up to northern Wisconsin. He took a job up there, since retired, but he was up there, and I happened to be up about an hour away, so I went and visited him because I thought I'd probably never get to his place again. All right, long story short, he was asking me about some problem he was having with his computer. So I said, well, let's look it up on Google. And I don't know how we got into it. He said, well, my browser doesn't work very well. So I looked at it. So maybe, I don't know how many years ago it was, but it was around when IE6 was out. He had IE2, literally. I never saw a person who even had IE2 before. And I said, how long have you had this browser? He said, well, it came with a computer. Well, why don't you upgrade and get a better one? I don't know how to do that. So, I mean, I did it for him, and it wasn't a big thing just to download it. All right. But the point is, there are still plenty of people out there that have older browsers. All right. So let's get in here and take a look at what code is in here. All right. So we are told, it says function process places will iterate through the array and print out the value of each city in the places array. Does it make sense to everyone that what we want to have happen here is those 5 bulleted items that are currently empty, we want them to fill up with each city? Does that make sense? All right. So, and again, when I say var in here and I gave it certain names, it doesn't matter what you call it. So in other words, I started out by saying var list item equals 0. List item is basically the way that I'm going to end up iterating through the list of items. LI stands for list item. Hence, I called it list item. All right, but you didn't have to call it that. All right, var, and I call this second one place. Again, you didn't have to call it that. And I said place is equal to now think about what this line right here is doing. It says get element by ID results. All right, so you've got to take a look up here and you've got to find where is results. There it is. It's the div that holds the unordered list that holds the 5 list items. Does that make sense? All right. So we are going to iterate through this. In fact, the next line I put a few comments in here, but I said here, iterate through the places array. What is the places array? That's this, var places. That's the places array. Now, that array has been pre-populated. Does that make sense to people? There are values in there already. So places sub 0 is Wentzville, places sub 1 is St. Louis, places sub 2 is O'Fallon, places sub 3 is St. Peter's, places sub 4 is St. Charles. That makes sense? Because I am expecting that when you do your test in a couple weeks, that stuff just makes sense to you. All right, we've dealt with arrays before. You've had arrays on your test. All right, so I want to iterate through this. So what am I going to do? For var I equals 0, I less than 5 plus I. Well, again, in English, and this should make sense to all of you, it says I'm going through this 5 times. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the idea is what we want to do in here is we want to go, and when we're in there the first time, when it's 0, that's going to be Wentzville, and we're going to put it right there. Again, does that make sense? You know, a lot of times people will say, yeah, it makes sense when you explain it like that, but when I'm writing it, it doesn't, and I can feel for you. That's why tomorrow, like I said, we're going to go through, and we're going to probably spend a good half the period going through some examples that I'm going to give you tomorrow. I was going to have us type them in, but I have 16 examples, and some of them are fairly long, and some of you don't type that well. Sorry, you just don't. So I'm going to give them to you, and we're going to go over each and every one of the examples. Before we do that, we're going to go through the JavaScript DOM tutorial that's out on W3 Schools. We're going to go through it fairly quickly because you could do it on your own. But I wanted to show you at least a couple of the exercises that are in there to help you. So when you take the test 2 weeks from today, all right, on chapters 5 and 6, you'll have an understanding of what's going on. All right? Okay. So, I put a big comment in here. You didn't have to do that, but I did anyway to explain what's going on. So I said here, add current array item, which I refer to as I plus 1. So in English, and I already mentioned this to you, I'm saying go out, grab the value from the places array, grab the current value as I'm iterating through those list of 5 values, grab it and throw it into the unordered list. It's exactly what we're doing, and it's 2 lines. So list item equals item plus I plus 1. And, again, you might say, wait a minute, I'm just kind of confused. If you're typing this in, and if what I'm doing doesn't make sense, when you get done, comment out this line. Literally, comment out that line in gray, put it in again, and take out the I plus 1. Just put it in there as I. And you'll notice that it's not going to work correctly. The best way to learn is to take something that you have and start to tear it apart. All right? So the next thing we want to do in here is a document dot get element by ID list item dot inner HTML equal places I. That literally says the first time you're running through there, grab Wentzville and throw it right here. Then grab St. Louis and throw it there. Then grab O'Fallon and throw it there. Then grab St. Peter's and throw it there. Then grab St. Charles and throw it there. That's exactly what these two lines of text are doing. I don't know any other way to put it other than that. All right, and again, that is why I went in. That's why I went in and I added, all right, some comments to hopefully make it easier to understand. So that is it for this function. I'm not done yet because I have to add what are called my event handlers. All right. If and again, fortunately or unfortunately, when you're doing this, it's done differently for Internet Explorer than it's done for everybody else. All right? This is the everybody else. So that's everybody except IE, old IE. And you put that one first because that's the one that's going to be true most often. Does that make sense? If you're going to use an if-else statement, and you put the thing inside of the if that's more likely to be true. All right, because then you don't have to check the else. If you put in the one that's most likely to be false, you're always checking the if, then you're checking the else. You're making the computer do extra work. All right, so if this is the case, in English, what this says is, hey, if it's anything but an older version of IE, run this program as soon as the document loads. Call this function. All right. So we are equating. That's a P. We are equating the load function with process places. Okay. Then we need an else in here. And this else is going to handle IE. So else if now, let me save it. I'll come right back to it, but let me save it and do a run it in Chrome, and there are my 5 savings. So you can see that it worked. All right? So again, we're telling it to jump through this thing 5 times. And each time you find it, I want you to grab what was in the array and throw it into the unordered list. And then finally, we're doing our event listener, where we're adding that. So this will be for everything except we'll call it old Internet Explorer. And this will be for old Internet Explorer. That's everything. Now again, if you say, you know what, I'm watching you and it just doesn't make any frickin' sense, then the first question I'd ask is, did you read the chapter? All right? Because the book does a pretty good job in the examples. And that's why I said to you, when you're going through these examples, all right, when you're going through these, don't just sit there and say, oh, key this in, key this in. Try to osmose and figure out exactly what you're being asked to do. Because basically, when you think about it, that's what the test is. I'm asking you to go back and, for lack of better words, kind of at least repeat the stuff that was in the chapter. Yes.
If you scroll up, why do you need the second variable called place?
Let's do it this way. Let's remove it. Evidently, you don't. I will admit, when I wrote this, sometimes I went back and looked at the authors after I got done and thought, well, they wrote it better than I did. And sometimes when I did that, I may not have removed my own stuff. Right? So evidently you don't need this line. Good question by Colin there. So evidently you don't need that. I mean, that makes sense. You got place, but you don't use place anyplace else. No pun intended. You've got places, process places, but you're not using place anywhere. So I guess you did not need that line. All right. Any other questions? Is everybody who wanted to get that down, got that down? All right, then let's go over the next one, then we'll take a break. All right, so I'm going to open up the next one, which is 3.4. All right, this is the one where you are supposed to be able to basically be able to add a tool here, click submit, and it goes here. Once you've got 5 tools added, all right, once you've got 5 tools added, it should give a message that says something like, thanks for your suggestions. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's something along those lines. All right, so again, what I have done here is I have put a bunch of comments in there and got you started. All right. Now, at the end, what we're going to do is we're going to do another add event listener, but we're not doing it exactly in the same way. So you'll see that in just a couple minutes. All right. So let's see. So we're in here. We're in our script tag. All right. So again, I'm going to literally come in here and put in exactly the same code. There must be about 20 lines, maybe closer to 30. I don't know. Now you're all getting, I hope at least, to the point where, with what I'm about to say here, you should understand that I is going to be some kind of a counter. All right, really, the only time that you should use variables like that, all right, the only time you should use variables like I, j, k, etc. is if you're counting. So you're going through a loop and you're counting how many iterations are in the loop. Okay? This list item is, again, going to apply to that. All right? Am I wrong in supposing everybody gets that? That makes sense? Again, you don't have to call it list item. But to me, it sure made sense to call it something that was at least somewhat representative of what we wanted to do. Well, it says in here, within the script, make two local variables. One named I, that was the first one. The other named list item, so that's this step right here. Now we're supposed to create a function that's called process input, and then create an if statement that runs if the value of I is less than or equal to 5. This is not a loop. This is an if statement right here. And since we want to say I is less than or equal to 5, we better make sure that someplace inside of that if statement, we give the user a way out. Does that make sense? Otherwise, if we kept calling that routine, then we could get into an infinite loop. All right? So, again, I'm just following the steps as they were shown in the book here. So we were supposed to write a function. And that function was supposed to be called process input. All right? And the first thing we were supposed to do is to set this value of the list variable. Again, I'm just grabbing, literally, just grabbing all the comments that the author gave us. All right? So, list item, our local variable that we just defined up here, right there, that list item, that is equal to whatever item we're working with plus I. So it's going to be either item 0, item 1, item 2, item 3, or item 4. Does that make sense? All right. Next, again, that's why I put in these comments. The next thing that we want to do here, as it says, is we want to set the content of the element with an ID equal to list item. Well, that should immediately, at least hopefully, document.getElement by ID. Okay? We're going to set its content, which means either, all right, we have to use the, text content, or we have to use inner HTML. We're going to use inner HTML. All right? So we want to set that equal to the value of the element with an ID of toolbox. Yeah, it makes, it's clear as mud. All right, but let's just take a look at it. So it's document dot get element by ID. And what do we want? We want list item. And I didn't put mine in double quotes. I'm not sure why I didn't, but it appears to have worked. Let's try it with the double quotes. If it doesn't work, I'll take them out. All right, list item dot inner HTML equal, I'm out of room. Everybody get this? You can keep typing if you want, but I'm going down to the next line because otherwise it's going to scroll off and you're not going to be able to see everything. So I'm just going to hit enter here, and I'm going to continue on the next line right here. And hold on a second, because now that I look at it, I missed the line. I apologize. This, I only want to do this right there. I only want to do this if I is less than 5. So let me go back. Let me hit tab here. And let me come and put a check in here that says if I is less than or equal to 5, that's when I want to do this. Okay, I'm not done yet, but I just want to show you what goes with what. Again, maybe you see why I do stuff like this. I do a begin there, and I do an end there. You don't have to do that. It doesn't make the program run any better. But if it's easier for you to see what curly brace goes with what curly brace, however you figure that out. All right? Now, what we want to do is when we have reached the end, everybody hear me? This is going to fill up those 5 things for us. This is going to do that. But when we reach the end, we want it to say, thanks for your suggestions. Did you hear what I said? That's what we want to put in there. And if you look here, if you look up on the screen, this is going to fill up our 5 tools. This is going to be where we say, thanks for your suggestion. Does everybody understand? This says ID equals. Right now, that's empty. Does that make sense to everybody? There's nothing in there. You'll get the dots, but nothing else. This is a totally empty paragraph. Does that make sense? Sometimes people get confused, and they're like, there's stuff in there, it says ID. No, those are IDs. Those are names that we're giving, all right? So what I want to do is I've got all this stuff in there, but I want to do something special if I is equal to 5. All right? So I want to do something special if I is equal to 5. So notice that should only be true when that thing over there means that I is equal to 5. So if that's the case, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add code right there that says if I is equal to 5. That should actually work fine with a triple equals or a double equals. All right. Then I want to do a document dot get element by ID. And what is that? That's that thing up here. I'm going to just grab it from right here. It's called results expression 1 or results exp1. So I want to put in there, all right, dot inner HTML, and I want to set that equal to what? I want to set that equal to thanks for your suggestions. All right. Now, other than adding the event listener, we're done except for one thing. Don't we have to have some way to make I go up? Because otherwise I is just going to be, we set I up here equal to 1. So it's always going to be equal to 1. So when I get done with this if statement right here, I want to say I++. All right, now hopefully that made sense. So right now, I don't think it's going to work because we didn't set up an event listener yet, but we can check. Nope. All right, we haven't opened up the communication between when we click this button, call this to make that go over there. We haven't done that yet. All right, when we did the last one, we didn't have a button. Would you agree with that? The last one we just did, we ran the program, boom, we had those 5 cities. There was no button. Now we have a button. So when we add an event listener here, all right, we're going to add the event listener to the button. Previously, we added it to the load event, which meant as soon as you run the program, call this. All right. Everybody who needs this have this code? All right. So I'm out of the function. I'm done with the function. All right. Now notice it says what we want to do here. I've got set the value of the element with the ID of toolbox to the empty string. If I is equal to 5, it should change it to thanks. Well, that comment that's right there is basically what we need to put in here. All right. And again, you're all smart enough to realize this. This putting in these comments does not make the program run faster. If anything, it slows it down. But it makes it easier to understand what's going on. All right, that's why occasionally I will ask you to actually put in comments and do some documentation. All right. Well, what didn't we do? We didn't do this. Set the value. All right. When do we want to do that? Well, we're adding a tool, right? What? Please look up on the screen here. See this right here? That, where the box is? That's what the author is telling you, that each time you hit this button, have what's in here go away. Because we want to add a new tool. Well, we're not doing that right now, so let's put that in. So I'm going to do a Control X here. I'm going to copy. And as soon as I fill up that value right here, I'm going to tell it, set the value of the element with the ID of toolbox, which means right there, we've already got the code. Set it equal to the empty string. Does that make sense? That literally, this line of code right here is saying clear out what is in that text box. All right? Now the program still would have run if I didn't do that, but I'd have to manually go in and remove that stuff every time. That's a pain. All right? When you do your next test, you will be writing a form and you will be adding JavaScript to the form to make things magically appear, disappear, or whatever. Does that make sense? This will be very similar to what we're doing in these exercises here, all right, and more in 5 and 6. All right, so does everybody have this? All right, so I'm now down at the end of the function. So what is my next comment here? Well, the next comment the author puts in here is add event listener to submit button. Okay, that seems like a good thing to do. Well, var, we can call it whatever we want. Usually people call it BTN, which is short for button, equals document dot get element by ID button. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that because I'm going to set the event listener up to that button. All right, now I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to cheat anyway. So I'm going to grab this code that I did from the last one, and I'm going to put it in and then make some changes to it. All right, so this is wrong right now. Please do not type this in. I have to make changes. All right, so this won't be window anymore. This will now be btn.add event listener, and we want to call here process input. All right, again, this is these are all btn. And this is not load, but click, because you click buttons, right? Not on load, but on click. Now, I'll come right back to it, but let's run it and see if it works correctly, or if I screwed something up. All right, so 5 tools, hammer. Well, that's not a great start, is it? It says I probably missed something. So I'll have to go back and take a look because I know this worked. All right. So I'm going to go back and take a look from the top. And I'm going to map that up against my code that I've got right here. Equal 1, list item, process input, 5, I, document.get by ID, list item. I'm going to try it without that, but I thought you needed that. Dot inner HTML, toolbox, value, toolbox, value, double quote, I equal 5. Suggestions, and that, I plus, and that. Okay, that was called button. Did I call it button up here? ID equal button, yes. Again, please look on the screen. Does everybody understand? For this button, we've got ID equal button. See that in the yellow right there? That is what we're using here. We're doing a mapping, for lack of better words. All right, btn.add event listener, btn add event listener, click, process input, false, else btn attach event, btn attach event, on click, process input. Well, to me it looks like everything in there is correct. No, it didn't like those double quotes. I don't know why. And you'll notice after I put the fifth one in, it gives me the thanks for your suggestions. All right. So let me go back in case you do want that, and that's everything.
You did yours without any arrays?
Did I do mine without any arrays? I don't believe there's an array in there. There are really a limitless number of ways that these can be done. You know, that's why when you asked your question yesterday about could I do it and do it a little different than what's in the book, well, that's actually a really good thing. You know what I'm saying? Because then you're saying, well, the author looks at it this way. I don't look at it like that, and that's good. All right, because I don't, you know, it's the old adage, we want you to think outside of the box. All right. Let's face it, when you go out and you're a programmer, you're not going to be given the end product and say, it's supposed to look like this, now build it. All right.
I don't understand the instructions sometimes.
We are not going with this book after this year. I was one of the people who pushed hardest for not using this book this year, but I lost that fight, and I guess I've won it for next year. It was right here. Originally, list item had double quotes around it, right there, on my line 137. And I removed the double quotes, and then it worked. I'm not sure why, but it didn't like them. Because we've got them here, and it works just fine with that. Well, I'll tell you what, if you hand yours in and you think it's done just the way this one is, even if it doesn't work, I'll look at it, but I'll give you credit for it. All right, it is 9:28. Since I went longer than normal today, let's go and let's come back at 9:45. And at 9:45, we will go over 4.1 and we will go over 4.3. Believe it or not, 4.1 won't take very long. I've given you all of the code. Everybody hear that? You have 100% of the code for 4.1. Well, geez, Jeff, why did you do that? You must be a really nice guy. No. But I did that because you can see how much code there was in this. That's all JavaScript. And I don't have that in me to sit there and go over 190 lines That's more than that. Let's see. We actually start right there. So literally, if you start from line 14, that says there's about 230 lines of JavaScript in this program. And I figured that would have taken us the whole period to key that in. So I gave it to you, but I want to go over it with you after the break. So get out of here. Let's take a break. Yes.
On the other one, can you say why you did, or why you did triple equals instead of double equals?
I said either one would work.
Okay,
All right.
that's what I thought.
Double equals, though, would have worked even if you had mistakenly put in there double quote 5, double quote. So if somebody put that in accidentally, double quote or double equals would have still rendered that as being correct, when technically it's not. So with a triple equals, it must be an integer 5. Whereas double quotes would have worked for an integer 5 or a string 5. No, JavaScript recommends that unless told otherwise, unless you have a really compelling reason, always use triple equals.
Always use triple?
Yes, that's their recommendation. Now they are one of the handful of languages that supports a triple equals. So does PHP. C# doesn't have that. Java doesn't have that. So a lot of, all the other languages that we teach in this program other than JavaScript do not have that.
Well, since, like you said, that the creator has those weird syntax rules, would you recommend always using triple?
I don't think it's ever a bad idea. I guess it depends on what you're checking. But some people will say this is a perfect time to use it because what you're checking is a number. Whereas if you're checking a string, it's typically not going to matter one way or the other.